quick emergency. What's the problem?
I've lost my 8-year-old daughter. I'm missing right now. It's reported now.
Alright. And was she playing with anybody at all?
She's playing with her brothers and her little sister, and she's walked away from them.
And what's the name of the little one missing?
Sarah.
Imagine this. It's a warm summer evening. 4 children are playing in a golden cornfield by the coast. Laughter echoes through the stalks. And then, in the time it takes to blink, to turn your head for just 1 second, one of them is gone. 60 seconds. That's all it took for 8-year-old Sarah Payne to vanish from the face of the earth. One moment she was there, running through the harvest after falling and hitting her head, tears streaming down her face, heading home to her grandparents' house. The next moment, nothing. Just silence, just an empty field, and 3 terrified children calling her name. This is the story of how one family's worst nightmare became a nation's obsession, how a single strand of hair would bring a monster to justice, and how a mother's grief would change the laws of an entire country. But here's what nobody tells you about this case, the detail that still keeps investigators awake at night. Sarah's abductor had been driving through that area at the exact moment she ran off crying. The road had one way in and one way out. He saw an opportunity that lasted less than a minute, and he took it. This is the story of Sarah Payne. July 1st, 2000, West Sussex, England. The Payne family had come to visit Michael's father and stepmother by the coast. It was the peak of summer, the kind of weekend where time moves slowly and children play until the sun sets. Sarah Evelyn Isabel Payne, 8 years old, was the imagination of the family, all pixies and fairies and dolls. Her mother would later say she was very much a girly girl, full of energy with her siblings, but timid around strangers, the kind of child who loved school, who wrote little notes to everyone saying, "I love you so much." That evening after dinner, the family took a walk down to the coastline. The children were having so much fun, they begged to stay out and play. Michael and Sarah, the parents, agreed. They put 13-year-old Lee in charge. The children would play in the cornfield, just meters from their grandparents' house. What could go wrong? Michael, Sarah, and Terry took a stroll themselves, enjoying the summer air. Soon, they headed back, wanting to settle in for the evening and get the children into bed. But as soon as they approached the house, they realized something was wrong. 13-year-old Lee, 12-year-old Luke, and 6-year-old Charlotte were standing outside with Leslie. Panicked, frightened, Sarah wasn't with them. Leslie clutched Charlotte's hand tightly and asked, her voice trembling, "Have you got Sarah?" "No," they said tentatively. The children explained what happened. Sarah had fallen over while playing. She hit her head. She started crying and ran off, heading for a gap in the harvest, trying to get back to the house. Lee turned around for just a split second, and when he looked back, she was gone. They'd looked for her for a few minutes before realizing they needed to get home, that something was terribly wrong. Everyone started running through the fields, down to the beach, gathering neighbors along the way, all of them searching, calling Sarah's name into the growing darkness. At 8:19 p.m., a 999 call was made to police. "I've lost my 8-year-old daughter." The voice on the line belonged to Sarah Payne, the mother. She was frantic, breathless, terrified. Her daughter Sarah did not come home with her brothers and sister. 2 hours later, police launched a major investigation into the young girl's disappearance. This would fast turn into a massive, nationally publicized hunt to find 8-year-old Sarah Payne. But here's what made this case different from the start. Here's what the investigators knew, but couldn't say publicly yet. The last place Sarah was seen had one road in and one road out. It was a wealthy, quiet area where holidaymakers rented seaside cottages. Little traffic, lots of countryside, houses very separated, but everyone knew each other. A reporter would later describe it as the kind of place where you really have to have a reason to need to go down there. It was safe. It was remote. It was the last place you'd expect a child to vanish. And that's exactly what made it so terrifying. Within hours, over 500 officers and volunteers were searching the area. They combed through fields and woods. They checked the beach, the roads, every possible hiding spot. But there was simply no evidence to be found. None of her clothing, nothing she dropped along the way. No leads, no clues, anywhere. Police immediately knew this wasn't a child who had wandered off and gotten lost. This wasn't in Sarah's nature. Everyone who knew her said the same thing. She would never just run away. The operation was codenamed Operation Maple, and everyone in the community was invested, doing anything and everything they could to help. As police began taking more detailed statements, Lee, the oldest brother, told his mother something. He was hesitant, uncertain if he should say it, but his mother encouraged him. "Tell me anything, no matter how small." Lee said he'd seen a white van on the road that evening. The driver was a scruffy man, and the man had smiled at him, waved as he drove past. Lee remembered watching the van speed off so fast, the tires were screeching against the ground. He said he was just seconds behind Sarah when she disappeared, just meters away. That white van became the first real lead in the case. Authorities started going door to door. They began questioning known sex offenders in the area. Over the next 48 hours, 2 arrests were made. Both times the suspects were swiftly released, but the investigation was only just beginning. Michael and Sarah Payne were making every appeal they could. Every media outlet was running Sarah's story. News cameras followed them everywhere. The nation watched as 2 parents desperately tried to bring their daughter home. In one press conference, Sarah introduced the public to her daughter's teddy bear. "He doesn't have a name yet," she said, her voice breaking. "Sarah will name him when she comes home." She read letters from Sarah's brothers and sister. "If you're reading this, please come home. We miss you, and we want you back. We will find you, no matter what it takes." Sarah Payne, the mother, was spearheading the media campaign, making sure everyone was talking about her daughter, looking for her daughter. She wouldn't hear any talk of Sarah being anything other than alive and well. In every appeal, she addressed her daughter directly. "Look at all these people looking for you. You'll be home soon. We promise you, you'll be home soon. If you know someone's got an extra child somehow, get in touch with your local police. Look around you, everybody. Just look around you. Sarah, if you're watching, Mommy loves you. We miss you. We're looking for you, and we're going to find you. You'll be home, darling. I'm still hopeful. She's alive." The picture of Sarah wearing her red school uniform became iconic, widely circulated, one that many people still remember to this day. But with nothing turning up, the military was soon brought in. The pop group Steps, Sarah's favorite band, made appeals. Reconstructions were broadcast on television. Before long, Sarah's case had become the biggest in Sussex police's history. After the appeals and reconstructions, thousands of leads came in. Every single one needed to be investigated. Someone believed they saw Sarah with a man at a service station. The girl was in the toilets crying, saying her name was Sarah, but this lead turned out to be false. Another witness said she'd seen what looked like a white transit van come hurtling down the road that day, the same van Lee described seeing that evening. This lead had a lot more weight to it, but then 2 weeks passed and everything changed. Our little princess has been not with us for 2 whole weeks now. We miss her terribly. Every day gets a little bit harder. It was now more than 2 weeks since Sarah was last seen. Family liaison officers arrived at the Payne family home with terrible news. That same day, the media reported it. Police, searching for the missing 8-year-old Sarah Payne, had found the body of a little girl in a West Sussex field, just 10 miles from where Sarah was last seen. A farm worker discovered her. She was naked, buried in a shallow grave. Her body was severely decomposed and had been attacked by animals. As the liaison officer, Sean, was telling Michael and Sarah to prepare for the worst, the media was already publicizing the story. Sarah's brothers and sister came running outside, asking their parents if it was true. Testing confirmed it. It was Sarah Payne's body. Sean offered to go see her first. When he returned to the house, Sarah said he was the shadow of the man who had left that day. Looking at how broken he was, she knew she couldn't face seeing her little girl like that. The pathologist said Sarah had suffered a violent death, probably asphyxiation, in a sexually motivated attack, but due to the decomposition, it was impossible to determine all her injuries. This was now a murder inquiry. Crime Watch ran a story. Appeals came from all across the country. The stretch of the 829 where Sarah was buried is a very nondescript piece of road, said Detective Peter Kennedy, who was running the investigation. On that Saturday evening, at about 11 o'clock, a lorry driver who was driving a 7.5-ton curtain-sided truck could well have seen the murderer of Sarah Payne. A vehicle pulled out from the exact spot where Sarah had been buried. It caused this lorry driver to brake sharply to avoid it. There's little doubt in my mind that the murderer had just buried Sarah. That driver could have also taken the registration number of the car down. Wouldn't that be wonderful? The detective also appealed to witnesses at a Texaco garage. Did you see a man that was nervous, agitated, sweating, perhaps dirty from having dug a grave? Did you see him in a vehicle? If you did, please contact us. It's vital that we speak to you. Sarah's mother made another appeal. There is somebody out there who knows what happened to Sarah. They know. I plead with all my heart for them to get in contact. Please don't let another little girl suffer. The detective described the emotional toll on the team. The entire team of 40 detectives watched the reconstruction. You could have heard a pin drop. I was not the only person to have tears in my eyes, dabbing them with a handkerchief. It highlights the bravery of the Payne family, who have been absolutely marvelous throughout this entire inquiry. Then, a woman came forward. She said she'd seen a shoe at the side of the road, near where Sarah's body was found. This was the lead police were looking for. The shoe was collected. They started searching that area for more clues, and that's when detectives circled back to a man they'd spoken to just one day after Sarah went missing, a convicted pedophile. 41-year-old Roy Whiting. Roy Whiting was described as a loner, an outcast. He had a string of past convictions, and when police first questioned him, he'd given them a false alibi. He had scratches on his body, and he answered no comment to everything he was asked. In the interrogation room, detectives pressed him. How far away from here were you in your vehicle when you first saw her? No comment. What sort of road was she walking on? No comment. At what stage did you decide that you were going to take her? Was it planned, or was it an instantaneous act? No comment. Roy Whiting was suspect number one, and here's why. Back in 1995, Roy had abducted and sexually assaulted an 8-year-old girl in Crawley. He was arrested and sentenced to 4 years in prison. A psychiatrist assessed him and said he was likely to re-offend once released and could possibly even kill his next victim. He was released after serving just half of his sentence. In 1997, he became one of the first people in Britain to go on the newly launched Sex Offenders Register. He moved to Littlehampton on the West Sussex coast. He started renting a flat just miles from where Sarah was last seen. Because he was on the Sex Offenders Register and lived in the area, he was one of the first people to be questioned in Sarah's case. When police went to his flat, he said he was out all day at a fair 21 miles away. His flat was forensically searched, but nothing turned up, and so the officers left. But they kept him under surveillance, monitoring everything he did, everywhere he went. At one point, during the surveillance, police saw him get into a white van, a van they didn't know he owned. They asked him to step out, did a quick search. It turned out he'd purchased the van just 1 week before Sarah was last seen. Inside, they found a receipt for fuel purchased on the day Sarah went missing, and this completely exposed his alibi. Other items in the van, children's blankets and toys. Sarah's body was discovered within 3 miles of the service station where Roy had bought that fuel and near his flat, but there was still insufficient evidence to charge him. What drew police to Roy Whiting for a second time was this: he stole a car and he took off. Police chased him at about 70 miles an hour before he crashed. He was arrested for theft and dangerous driving, and this gave them more time to question him about Sarah again. Police believed that no matter how well he thought he'd covered it all up, Roy Whiting was behind what had happened to Sarah Payne, but he still wasn't talking. He was released pending his court date for the car theft. One of the officers leading the investigation said something about Sarah's abduction and death had touched a nerve throughout the entire United Kingdom. This was the very first case that was so enormous in the eyes of the public. A funeral was finally held for Sarah. Her mother said when they buried her, they gave her the funeral a princess should have, because she could never give her the wedding a princess should have. She said she owed it to the public, to everyone who had been there supporting, searching, appealing since July. It's very hard when the entire country has ownership of your daughter, she said. You want to go away to a little corner and just mourn and deal with life, but knowing how much this meant to everyone else, Many mourners flocked to say goodbye to Sarah. Her father, Michael, read a letter. "Dear Sarah, ever since you came bounding into our lives at 2 in the morning with no phone in the house, one tooth in your head, and a smile that could melt ice, we loved you. You were a joy that made our lives full. Daddy called you Princess, because that's just what you are." Sarah and Michael Payne believed early on that their daughter had been snatched and killed by a sex offender, although they had no idea who. Sarah started channeling her energy into researching the laws on sex offenders. They vowed they would change the system. When the News of the World newspaper gave their backing, they all started calling on law enforcement to adopt the British version of what's known as Megan's Law in America. This law would require police to make information about known local sex offenders available to the public. It would allow parents, carers, or guardians to formally ask the police for information about a person who'd had contact with their child. If they were concerned the person posed a risk, a decision was made to publish the names and faces of 50 pedophiles convicted of offenses against children in the News of the World. It was an extremely controversial decision. Critics accused the newspaper of inciting vigilante justice. There were many attacks off the back of this. People who shared the same names as those in the paper found themselves attacked, but more than 1 million people signed the petition to make Sarah's law happen. In September 2000, 2 months after Sarah went missing, Roy Whiting pleaded guilty to stealing the car. He was sentenced to 22 months in prison. 22 months gave police a substantial amount of time to forensically analyze as much as they could to build a good case against Roy. They started running tests on his van. The van was made to carry furniture. It was full of plywood that went around the inside. The plywood was easy to strip out and burn. It was clear that any evidence that may have been inside could be long gone, but the fear of not finding anything quickly dissipated. A single blonde hair was discovered on a red sweatshirt. It was a strand of Sarah's hair. The shoe found on the side of the road was soon confirmed to be Sarah's as well, and the Velcro strap on the shoe had picked up fibers that linked to the inside of the van. On the 6th of February 2001, following 7 months of testing and gathering evidence, Roy Whiting was finally charged with the abduction and murder of Sarah Payne. Roy William Whiting: "I'm Detective Sergeant Hinchcliffe, and I'm going to charge you that you murdered Sarah Evelyn Isabel Payne." Soon after being arrested in Kent, Roy Whiting was driven in a people carrier back to Sussex. As he arrived at the police station, an egg was thrown at the vehicle by one of several onlookers. Shockingly, he pled not guilty. The family were faced with the pain of a trial that could end up presenting more evidence and facts than they ever wanted to hear. During the trial, Roy Whiting's previous convictions were withheld from the jury and media. Police worried that although absolutely relevant to Sarah's case, any knowledge of these convictions could jeopardize the outcome of the trial. If he was convicted, Whiting could appeal, claiming he'd been tried on the evidence of earlier crimes and not the ones linking to Sarah. But in December 2001, after a 4-week trial, Roy Whiting was found guilty on all counts. The judge said he'd be recommending that Whiting be kept in prison for the rest of his life. This was met by the loudest cries of "yes" in court. Whiting was taken away to begin that sentence. He was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 50 years. Roy Whiting would spend the rest of his life in prison for the murder of little Sarah Payne. After the trial was over, his previous convictions were laid bare. The jury and media now knew the full truth. Sarah's mother spoke after the verdict. "This doesn't make us happy, but justice has been done. Sarah can rest in peace now. But let's make sure that this stops happening time and time again. People are being let out of prison when everybody concerned knows that this is going to happen again." When asked to describe the moment she heard the verdict, she said, "I thought of Sarah and nothing else." Michael and Sarah Payne sadly announced their separation in September 2003. They both said the stress and emotional turmoil brought on by what had happened to Sarah had put too much strain on their relationship. Sarah gave birth to another daughter shortly after, giving them 4 surviving children. Together, all of Sarah and Michael's hard work with Sarah's Law finally started to make progress. It was trialed. In 2008, Sarah was awarded an NBE for her tireless efforts in making this happen. In 2009, just a week before Christmas, Sarah had a stroke brought on by a brain aneurysm. She underwent 2 brain operations in less than 2 days. She was given a 50% chance of survival. "No illusions here," she said. "This is going to be a tough mountain to climb. I've got a long way to go. I've got a lot of work to do. I'm going to have to work really hard in rehab every single day for the foreseeable future." She made it through it all, and she didn't ever slow down, continuing her campaigns after she recovered. She endured relentless abuse and harassment from online trolls, including from a convicted pedophile, but she never once wavered. Sarah's Law, also known as the Child Sex Offender Disclosure Scheme, was finally extended across England and Wales. But another blow for the family came when Roy Whiting successfully appealed his sentence. It was lowered to 40 years instead of 50. "Of course it's outrageous," Sarah said. "The guy's going to be in his 80s, but is he going to make it to 80? And if he does, is he going to be allowed out? He's got to go for parole. Are they going to let him out? He ain't coming out. He ain't gonna walk our streets again." When it was 50 years, my family and I could relax that he wasn't anywhere near children, and there was no chance of getting paroled. Now obviously, we're a little bit reeling from this. He still has his life sentence, but the family doesn't get a parole date. There is no parole date for the family. There is no end to this. This is our lives from now on. He is now eligible for release in 2041. He will be 82 years old. He is despised in prison and continues to face multiple attacks from other inmates. In 2010, a huge story hit the headlines. The chief reporter and former news editor of the News of the World were arrested by police investigating phone hacking at the newspaper. The News International phone hacking scandal involved the now defunct News of the World and other British newspapers owned by media tycoon Rupert Murdoch. Various employees of the newspaper were accused of engaging in phone hacking, police bribery, and exercising improper influence in the pursuit of stories. Thousands of people were targeted and hacked. Victims and their families, actors and performers, politicians, and members of the royal family, sports stars, solicitors, in high-profile cases, and high-ranking members of the police force. Almost 5,000 victims were identified. In 2002, Millie Dowler was abducted and killed by serial killer Levi Belfield. In 2011, Scotland Yard discovered Millie's voicemail had been accessed by journalists working for the News of the World and the newspaper's private investigator, Glenn Mulcair. It was also reported journalists had deleted some of her messages on the phone in order to free up space for new messages, so they could obtain those as well. The deletions of the messages had actually led her family and police to believe she was still alive and active on her phone. They also deleted what could have been potential evidence. The Leveson Inquiry was a judicial public inquiry into the culture, practices, and ethics of the British press. Over the following years, a series of public hearings were held. The truth about what had been happening over the years started to unravel. Many came forward to speak at the Leveson Inquiry. Kate and Jerry McCann, Christopher Jefferies, who had been wrongly accused of the murder of Joanna Yates back in 2011, numerous powerful and public figures, and those accused of crimes. Sarah Payne was also amongst those told by Scotland Yard that there was evidence to suggest she was targeted as well. She was given a phone by Rebecca Brooks so she could contact her supporters. It's thought that this phone was hacked. Rebecca Brooks was the editor for the News of the World at the time. Sarah said if this was true, it was devastating and disappointing, but she said the News of the World had been a force for good in her daughter's case and in helping with Sarah's law. Rebecca Brooks said, "The idea that anyone on the newspaper knew that Sarah or the campaign team were targeted is unthinkable. The idea of her being targeted is beyond my comprehension. It is imperative for Sarah and the other victims of crime that these allegations are investigated and that those culpable are brought to justice." Rebecca herself was soon charged with 5 different counts: conspiracy to hack voicemails, 2 counts of conspiracy to pay public officials, and 2 counts of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. She was cleared of all charges in 2014. She resigned as the chief executive of News International, but was later reappointed CEO of the company, which is now named News UK. The phone hacking scandal brought down the News of the World. It saw the resignation of a number of senior members of the Metropolitan Police Force. Many people working for the News of the World and News International lost their positions. Rupert Murdoch resigned as News International's director. His son James resigned as executive chairman, but those affected were undoubtedly left in incomparable positions, and forever will be. Although she spoke of her upset at the affair, Sarah Payne contributed to the final issue of the News of the World. She said in part, "It's easy to forget in these times that the News of the World has been a force for good, and it has something to do with the people who worked on it. I do not pretend they are perfect or always got things right." She also said Rebecca was always in the foreground of the campaign. "I did not sleep. I could call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she would pick up the phone." The Payne family was soon struck with yet more heartbreak. Sarah's dad, Michael, sunk into severe depression and alcohol abuse after the loss of his daughter. He would have recurring nightmares. He blamed himself every day for what happened to Sarah. Tragically, in 2014, Michael was found dead in his flat in Kent. He was just 45 years old. He spent his final days alone, drinking, telling everyone and anyone he spoke to that he should have been able to save his daughter that day. The coroner reported he had died of natural causes. His father said, "We don't know exactly what he died of, but we think it was drink-related." Her siblings also bear an emotional burden. Lee, the oldest brother, said, "I'm scared to sleep at night half the time, so I'll work myself solid until I pretty much drop because of my fears of what's there when I close my eyes. I create things that didn't happen or things that could have happened. I make scenarios up in my head. It just eats me away, so I don't get a lot of sleep. I did for a few years beat myself up about it, thinking that if I'd maybe run faster or not run through the corn, I might have caught up with her, thinking that if I'd had my head on that day and realized she was in the back of that van. But ultimately, I was a 13-year-old kid. There's not much I would have been able to do. It's hard to say how you kind of move on from something like that. I don't think it's a process you can put into words. I think it's literally just something that happens day by day, and it's not something that ever really fully happens. It's never gonna be a day when you turn around and be like, "Oh, I'm over that now," because it's just not gonna happen. Charlotte, the youngest sibling, said, "After something like that has happened in your family, I think everyone feels a bit of guilt. Why was it her? Why not me? I think that's gone through mine and my brother's minds, because it is. Why her? Why not one of us? And I think you kind of feel guilty when something so bad like that's happened to someone you love. You almost feel guilty for just even being alive, and they're not." Sarah's family have always been determined that her death would not be in vain. Officers described Sarah, the mother, as one of the most resilient and extraordinary women they had ever met, handling every second of the painful case with nothing but control, strength, and grace. She has gone on to win numerous awards for her work in child protection. She became Britain's first ever victims commissioner. She was then academically acknowledged for her work in social engineering with an honorary doctorate, becoming Dr. Sarah Payne, MBE. "I talk to her every day," she says, "always. As an 8-year-old, she will always stay 8, forever. I can see through my other children what she would look like, and I have a good idea of what she would be like, personality-wise." Writing letters to her has helped to make up in a small way for the teenage years and beyond that I didn't get with her. It has made her more real. I can hear her giggling. I can see her mischievous smile. For me, I want to always remember her as that lovely, sweet 8-year-old girl. A statue stands in Sarah's old primary school in memory of her. It symbolizes childhood happiness and innocence, a beautiful and fitting tribute that reflects the happy, loving, and kind-hearted little girl that Sarah Payne was. Her family work hard to make sure Sarah will never be forgotten, and the hope is always that Sarah's law will continue to help protect children and their families for many years to come. But here's the haunting question that remains. How many other children could have been saved if Roy Whiting hadn't been released early, if the psychiatrist's warning had been heeded, if the system had protected the vulnerable, Instead of giving predators a second chance, Sarah Payne's death changed British law, but the question that keeps investigators, activists, and her family awake at night is this: how many more Sarah Paynes will it take before we truly learn? If this story shook you to your core, check the video on your screen now. I believe it was made for you.